Hello and welcome to TLC Talks Black with BFRBs. I'm Jen Monteleone, the Interim Executive Director of the TLC Foundation for Body-Focused Repetitive Behaviors. Thank you so much for joining us today for this very important conversation and celebration of Black History Month. I'm going to give people just a couple moments to get settled. So hang on as a few more folks come in. Okay. If you would like to hear this event in Spanish today, please bring your attention to the bottom of the Zoom toolbar and find the interpretation icon. It's a little globe. You have the ability to toggle back and forth between English and Spanish. You also have the ability to lower the English speaker and mute original audio if you only want to hear the Spanish interpretation. Some quick housekeeping items before we get started. This is a 60-minute educational webinar offered in a safe, inclusive, and welcoming environment for everyone attending today. We appreciate you adhering to the code of conduct throughout the event, including asking and answering questions. Attendees have two ways to participate in the webinar today: through the Q&A feature and through the chat box. Questions for the presenters should be asked through the Q&A feature, and those questions will be answered at the end of the webinar. Our presenters will be asking participants to answer 2 questions during today's event. Please answer those questions using the chat box feature. And if anyone has any tech challenges during the webinar, please use the chat box to message Hannah, one of our TLC staff members, and she will be happy to help you. And now, it's my distinct pleasure to introduce Saharra Dixon and Tamarra Davis. Hello, ladies. Co-founders of the Imani BFRB Support Group and change makers in the BFRB community and beyond. Welcome, Saharra and Tamarra.
Hello, hello. Thank you. Thank you. We are very happy to be here celebrating Black History Month with you all. And we're happy for the introduction. And we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen right now. Okay. Welcome to TLC Talks, Black with BFRBs. We are your hosts for the evening. My name is Saharra Dixon, and I'm here with my co-facilitator, Tamarra Davis.
Hello.
Before we get started, I just want to make note that Tamarra and I are 2 Black women with BFRBs sharing our experiences and the experiences of others in our community to potentially a predominantly white or non-Black audience. So we just want to remind everyone to just remember their positionality throughout this conversation, and we will go ahead and get started.
So I know that the housekeeping tips have already been talked about, but I think many of us love to have fidgets on hand, so definitely have your fidgets on hand. Feel free to have water and snacks with you. We appreciate you being brave in this inclusive space and think about your personality in this discussion, but we also encourage people to be open and have fun.
Awesome, awesome. So we're gonna go ahead and just do some introductions, just so you know a little bit more about us. Again, my name is Saharra Dixon. I'm going to read this off, but my name is Saharra. I'm a health educator, certified health educator with passions for social justice and health equity. I'm working to, quote unquote, decolonize the BFRB community, as well as mental health care as well. I co-founded the Imani BFRB Support Group with Tamarra, and I study the experience of Black women with BFRBs. That isn't the only thing that I study, but for the purposes of today, this is something that I am very passionate about. I am a public health PhD student at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. So I'm currently in Amherst, Massachusetts, and I received my Master's of Arts in Applied Theater from NYU Steinhardt in New York City. I'm a performing artist. I believe that the arts can be used to facilitate community development, catalyze public engagement, critical dialogue around health, wellness, and healthcare. And my BFRB is trichotillomania, and I also have generalized anxiety disorder.
All right, so my name is Tamarra. I am a special educator with dreams of being involved in the work to fight against the stigma of mental illness and disabilities. My brother has autism, and he is my inspiration. I also became involved with BFRB communities to understand my own battles because I have dermatillomania, generalized anxiety disorder, and depression. I currently have a bachelor's in human services because my hope was always to help others as others has helped me. And I hope to get my master's in special education full time. And I co-founded the Imani group with Saharra to not only be more involved in the community and the struggles, but I also want to gain more knowledge and be more transparent about my experience, not just as a person with a BFRB, but also as a Black woman.
Yes, awesome. So we're going to jump right into it. Black with BFRBs. With a skin picking disorder, it means standing out for more than one reason. Never finding mental health professionals who look like me. It means patches of pink skin on my brown skin and people recommending I bleach my skin to get rid of the spots.
For me, to be Black with a BFRB means additional shame and judgment that I feel is not felt among other races. There seems to be an expectation of perfectionism in the Black community that hinders my ability to be open about my BFRB. Also, sometimes there seems to be a disregard or lack of urgency/seriousness associated with mental illness that makes my ability to talk about BFRBs with my peers very difficult. Being Black with a BFRB means hiding my skin, suffering in silence, and trying to get rid of a bad habit. On the bright side, it also means immense opportunity. It means being optimistic that with time, more Black people will become aware of, understand, and provide support for their Black peers who are suffering with BFRBs.
It's been a struggle my entire life because only recently have we as a community accepted mental health as something that we suffer from as well. My BFRB is my hands. I pick up my skin, my nails, and the skin around it, my cuticles, and more. My hands are often dry, calloused, and cracked, and worst case scenario, bloody. Being ashy has been a lifelong teasing point all over my body, but especially my hands. And even when I'm not obsessively picking and I've allowed my nails to grow and my cuticles to heal, my skin is now so discolored. After 30 years, my hands appear white and pink from a distance or in photos as if they are unmoisturized. As a little girl, my mom used to tell me, her none the wiser that this was more than just a bad habit. No boy would want to hold my hand if I didn't stop picking and biting. My hands have always been an incredible source of shame and embarrassment. And though I'm slowly learning to accept it now at almost 32, I don't know that I will ever totally be okay with this condition.
Being a Black woman already comes with its beauty, its joys, but it also comes with its stigmas, and Black hair will always be one of them. For me, it's wearing a wig knowing that most women, not just Black women, are wearing wigs or hair pieces on a wide scale, but still feeling judged for wearing the same. For me, It's the questions from other women of color. Well, what does your natural hair look like? How long is it? Without being able to explain my condition because I'm not personally close to you. It's loving to swim and avoiding pools unless it's only to wade in very carefully. In a world today celebrating a Black woman's unique beauty, it's still feeling inferior because you can't fully embrace your crown. Being a Black woman with trichotillomania isn't fun. It's lonely, sometimes embarrassing, and often just lived with. I can only imagine the stories of our aunties and grandmothers we know who wore wigs all the time, only to see their natural hair in its natural state much, much later in life and realize our own aging and morality. Did we ever stop to ask or even ponder what hair issues they might have had? I'm only starting to realize now, and I weep for their inner realities. Now I'm blessed to have a wonderful partner who supports this journey and this struggle. I'm grateful to understand I'm not alone, that I'm not crazy, that it can be hereditary. I'm appreciative of the wealth of information that is now out in the world to help us be more informed about ourselves and each other. I'm also learning that the journey doesn't end.
To me, it means that you wear the scars of it. With the scars of them, whatever they look like to you comes with shame.
What I wish people knew, that the behaviors are literally an untreated compulsory reaction to life. We do so many other things to our bodies, from risky, intimate encounters or over-medicating with substances and or food, and it's shrugged off. These behaviors are just as damaging and should be treated with the sense of compassion and care that would be given to anyone on a journey out of addictive behaviors.
The intersectionality makes me stand out in all of my communities. I don't see a lot of other Black people with BFRBs. It can feel lonely.
I wish we as a community knew that any mental health behavior is indicative of something larger and that we were able to better identify the signs. My BFRB is a result of OCD. Only recently have I made the connection and shared with my father, who also tends to pick at his hands and feet obsessively, that we have this condition. I think if he had the knowledge and the resources to recognize that this was more than a bad habit, we could have more quickly seen the connections between his behaviors and mine.
What we need: dermatologists who understand and therapists who look like me. Numbers. I think knowing more Black people with BFRBs would be most helpful for me. Awareness and visibility are powerful, and I think could inspire more people to seek information about themselves. More information on how to access Black psychological professionals and help groups.
Would like to see more Black mental health support, such as Black-led guided meditation and seeing Black people promoting fidgets and BFRB tools, resources, so that BFRBs don't seem like only a white condition. Informational resources from a Black-centered perspective.
Okay, great. So those are stories from some of our members of the Imani BFRB Support Group, which is a support group for Black young adults ages about 18 to 35. And so first, I want to make some space to just thank those for being vulnerable and sharing their story with us. I believe there's so much power in sharing your story. so that others feel empowered to also share their story, because it always starts with a story. So I wanted to talk a little bit more about the My Bfrb support group. So about us, we are Imani, Tamarra, and I co-founded it. We are a virtual BFRB support group for Black young adults ages about 18 to 35, fostering faith, hope, and community. We are excited to connect in our common goal to break the stigma of BFRBs through creativity and expression, something very integral to the Black experience. Tamarra and I really felt there was a need not only for a support group, but a space to come together and just talk about being Black and talk about Black and mental health. A lot of the times in this group, we talk not only about our BFRBs, but as you know, BFRBs can be comorbid, meaning coexisting with other mental health challenges. For example, my trichotillomania, meaning hair pulling, with my generalized anxiety disorder, right? And so it's just a space to come together and feel like we can, for a lack of a better term, let our hair down and be in community with people that look like us and share similar experiences. And that is so powerful, having quote unquote safe spaces where we can come together and be ourselves without judgment or fear of harassment or any of those things.
So during some of our mini meetings, we've had some recurring themes, not just from me and Saharra, but from many others that have joined our group. And these are the themes that come up quite often, which is the lack of Black practitioners knowledgeable about BFRBs, understanding of unique journeys for Black people with BFRBs, including colorism and textures, safe spaces, nail salons, hair, etc., acceptance, and dealing with the stigma of mental health in the Black community. So from my experience dealing with dermatillomania, things like going to prom, graduation, all those happy events, even my mother's wedding, I didn't really feel that there was a safe place for me to go to get things like my nails and my hair done without having to really talk myself through how am I going to deal with the questions that I know I'm going to get and what is my response going to be. And so that is one of the things that is very important to us, is having those safe spaces to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I know for me, I'm going to take a moment to talk about my journey with my BFRBs and relate to some of these recurring themes, just to kind of put these into perspective. And because this is a community of folks with BFRBs, I'm going to be very vulnerable right now. And thank you for holding space for me in this vulnerability. For many people, not all, but many, we kind of noticed that we have BFRBs at a very young age. So for me, I started hair pulling at about 10 years old. And I pulled from my pubic hair. Right? When we're thinking about trichotillomania and hair pulling, it's truly any side of the body where hair exists. And so I started pulling from my pubic hair. And because there is a stigma and lack of, I guess, knowledge around BFRBs more generally, but mental health in general, right? I would get comments from my family like, oh, you must be digging for gold down there. Get your hands out of your pants. Stop. Do you want me to take this away? Just very kind of responses that did not make me feel good. And instead of it making me feel like I wanted to seek help, I actually became a little bit of a recluse and would go to my bedroom and hair pull. And I would make sure I was as far away from people as possible. And as I got older and I became more depressed and I became more anxious about things, I remember going to my mother and being like, Mom, I'm really depressed. I'm having a really tough time. I know for me, I was the only Black person in my elementary and middle school until about 9th grade. So just imagine feeling so alienated on top of having this condition at 10 years old that you have no language around, on top of being in a culture predominantly, I wouldn't say all, but predominantly where mental health is not talked about at all. we're not bringing this up at the kitchen table. I don't feel comfortable telling folks I feel sad. To be a Black woman, we're not allowed to be sad. There is no, oh, I'm having a tough week, I need to take a moment. And for Black girlhood, and we're thinking about Black girlhood, and we're thinking about how Black girls are, in a way, made to feel like adults in society before they actually become adults. And we have to push. And so I remember talking to my mom and being like, Mom, I'm really depressed. I'm really anxious. I'd love to go see a therapist. And she told me, and I love my mom. I really do. But she told me, why would you ever wish that upon yourself? Go pray about it. And so I remember going to the school nurse and being like, you know what? I'm depressed. I'm anxious. I'm pulling my hair out. I'd love some help. And the nurse told me, you know, kids like you, they always go through a little struggle. You'll be okay. So at a very young age, was very dismissed. Church was brought up, stigma, shame, kids like you. What does that, that's so loaded. What does that even mean, right? So understanding that, having spaces where, you know, I can go to the salon, for example, I would get my hair done and they'd be like, what's going on in the middle of your hair? Just asking very, you know, unique questions and thinking about colorism and texturism, right? When we think about symptomology of trichotillomania, for example, when I'm pulling my hair, okay, yeah, I might be anxious, but I'm also pulling my hair because my curls are so tight and I was internalizing a lot of colorism and a lot of texturism. My hair pulling, at least for the top of my hair, really resulted from me subconsciously not being okay with my tight curls and wanting to pull and try to straighten and pick the knots. And so thinking that, yes, there are folks of all races, all ethnicities, all genders who hair pull, who nail bite, who skin pick. But for a lot of it, culture, identity, and race, right? It plays a part. And so these are just things that we've talked about, some recurring themes that we've talked about. But again, I really implore you to just ask folks in the community, ask folks about their experience so you can learn a little bit more. Okay, so we have a call to action, but we are going to ask, this is more of an interactive part of this workshop. We have a call to action. So we have two questions for you. So the first question is, what does diversity mean to you? What is diversity? What does it mean to you? So you can put your answers in the chat and, you can put your answers in the chat and we'll start reading off some of these responses. And again, as you are working through some of these responses, we just want to reiterate, please remember your positionality and your intention with your responses. Thank you. So what does diversity mean to you? We'll give it about a minute for folks to respond. Mm-hmm.
We have a couple in already. One says, including all walks of life. Another answer says differences.
Awesome.
Being open. Another one says interested.
Okay, so thank you. And then again, some of these, you know, you don't have to put them in the chat. These are more so, we really want you to just get thinking about some of these things. I think there's a few more in the chat.
Diversity means to be inclusive of all types of people and personalities, and no, in quotes, majority.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. So the next question we're going to have you think about is, so you've kind of defined, or at least defined what diversity means to you, what work needs to be done to bring this sort of diversity to places where you live, work, pray, and play? So for example, nail salons, hair salons, clinics, hospitals, schools, churches, etc. What work needs to be done to bring this sort of diversity to places that you frequent? So you can go ahead and put your answers in the chat. Again, there's no right or wrong answers, folks. We just want you to get your brains moving, get thinking. And we'll give about a minute or two for folks to type up their response and send it. What work needs to be done to bring this sort of diversity to places where you live, work, pray, and play? Okay.
So we've got several answers to this one, including more conversations, more understanding, less judgment, education awareness, understanding that an injury to one is an injury to all, knowledge, more awareness, inclusion needs to be talked about openly, awareness of positionality in these spaces, intentionality, being responsive to respecting others' differences.
Great. See, I told you all, no wrong answers. We just want, Tamarra and I really want you all, when we're thinking of calls to actions and we're thinking about some of these quote unquote harder or difficult conversations, it can be very easy to want to shy away from these conversations. But we want to open it up. You know, this is a learning opportunity for everyone involved, right? Including myself, including Tamarra. We really want you to be thinking about these things. And so with that, we have something that we want to, I believe there actually, it might be some more in the chat. So I want to make some space for those as well.
Yeah, do you want me to share some more? Okay.
Yeah, why not?
Normalizing service projects and experiences in different neighborhoods at all stages of life. And then we have another one in the Q&A, information, reach out with talks. One of our participants is from Colombia, and diversity is beautiful, not only in that discrimination is, I think there's a little bit of translation, is not, is horrible, that discrimination is horrible.
Yes, for sure. And so when we're thinking about, thank you everyone for taking a moment to indulge in those questions. When we're thinking about being intentional and we're thinking about diversity and we're thinking about what can I do to bring more diversity in general in life, right? But you know, we're here, TLC Talks. How can I bring more diversity into this field as not only a peer or someone, you know, with a BFRB, but also our psychologists, our therapists, our policymakers, our nonprofit leaders, right? We are thinking of people at all sectors here, you know, our researchers. And so the call is to be intentional, right? There's an intentionality in your positionality. Don't just say you're about it, but be about it. So I want you to really think about your answers to how can I bring more diversity? Don't just say, oh, you know, educating folks. Don't just say talking to policymakers. Don't just say wanting to combat medical racism, right? Don't just say, oh, I want to bring more I want to recruit more Black folks into my psychology program at University of X, Y, and Z. But be intentional with that and actually do it and actually have conversations with people about how to actually get that done, right? Don't just say you're about it, but be about it.
So, in essence of being vulnerable, I wanted to give my own vulnerability in this moment because I think it's really important to talk about how we can shorten this gap. Because I think that this is a very important open conversation, and it's one that rings true to me and is very, very important to me because there was nothing worse than growing up and having people that thought that they were being helpful, but having that lack of knowledge and the lack of tact actually did much more harm to me than people who were intentionally out to hurt me. I remember growing up with friends, and I had a few friends that would make little suggestions about, oh, your skin would be much more beautiful if you do this, or this is something that I try. I think that you should try this, or even making the comment, oh, your skin looks really good today. What did my skin look like to you yesterday then? So it's really important that we're intentional in how we want to help and how we want to be allies and how we want to join the cause. So in the way of contacting us and helping us bridge that gap, you can get in touch with us through Imani BFRB at gmail.com. Our group is for Black people with BFRBs. However, if you would like to get in touch with us in order to see how you can partner or be an ally, or what are some things that you feel like would be helpful, we would love all of that. However, being intentional in your position is also very important as well. So we want to make sure that when we're having these discussions, we're very open to these discussions, but we also ask that people be very intentional about what they would like to do and how they want to gain more knowledge or help us bridge that gap.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Tamarra, we have a question about the group. Is the group limited to an age minimum or maximum at all? Is there an age minimum?
Yeah, so our age group is from 18 to 35.
Yes. However, we, as time goes on, we're a relatively new support group, just to throw that out there. It's only been maybe less than a year, or maybe just about a year right now.
Just a year.
And so, yeah. And so we are always, Tamarra and I are always constantly shifting and making space for what we feel Black folks with BFRBs truly need. So at any point in time, we might expand that. But right now we're focusing on young adults. And then also just wanna point y'all to our Instagram at Imani BFRB. That's kind of where we share most of our information for the general public if they're just wanting to be, again, like Tamarra said, more involved in the community. And then we just ask that, we know you came here to this workshop. We're very grateful for you to come to this talk. But again, any feedback in terms of this presentation should not go to us. That should go to TLC. So I just want to be very cognizant of, what emails we get in, any partnerships or, suggestions, or I'd love to help. We welcome that. Any critiques or anything of that nature about this specific TLC talk should definitely go to TLC. And yeah, without further ado, I mean, we have a boatload that we could talk about being Black BFRBs, and we can bring in a lot of experiences from the My Bfrb group. So we're gonna go ahead and move.
And I see a couple of questions too. And it's funny that you say the Q&A. So I saw one question in the chat that, is it open to Black people with BFRBs outside the US? Yes.
Yes, we have some folks, for example, in the UK who join. I mean, obviously the time zone is wonky, but that folks are, it just shows that there's a need for spaces like this, right? There's a need, and people are making time and energy to come and awesome to come and they need this community, and so it just shows how vital sorts of brave spaces like the Imani BFRB are to our community, because even though you might have folks in the UK or Latin America or South America, or, you know, wherever in the world, you know, there are certain experiences that are different, but there are a lot of experiences that do overlap. So I guess we'll go right into the Q&A, and as we answer them, I'm sure we can weave in some more of our experiences, Tamarra, and if there aren't a lot of questions, we can talk. We have lots to say about being Black with BFRB, so we can fill some space.
Okay, well, we have several questions coming in.
Awesome.
And the first one is, as a Black man, how would you suggest I bring up having a BFRB with my friends? I don't know how to talk about it because I wasn't told how to.
So, from my experience, because I came out with it about a year ago. And for me, the first step of it was literally just coming bare, because for years I wore makeup. I wore makeup from the time of 14 all the way up until 27 every day, even to go to the market. It just was my everyday life. And at one point, I left all my stuff behind and it freaked me out completely. And I just, in that moment, I don't suggest that, but I feel like showing your self bare was the best thing to just get it out there and open that door for that conversation. There was really no recipe for how to bring it up in stages. So I just threw myself into that vulnerable moment, and it not only went well, but now I have many friends that want more knowledge and have been asking me a lot of questions, not just about dermatillomania, but trichotillomania and BFRBs as a whole. So I would also say too, there's some people that you know that you can trust to be vulnerable with, and there's others that you know that are not ready for that truth yet. So figuring out who is ready for that truth is the best piece of advice I can give.
Yes, I would piggyback off of Tamarra. I started being more vocal about my BFRB undergrad at the University of Delaware, because I was in a dorm and living with someone, and I didn't want them to be alarmed that I was like excessively pulling at my hair and my eyelashes, and then being like, "Is everything okay?" And so I just told my roommate, and I was just like, yeah, so I don't want you to be alarmed. I do this thing. There's a medical term for it. You know, it would be great if you see me pulling, if you can just help me redirect my energy, but please don't tell me like, stop pulling, get your hands out of your hair. Just, you know, engage me in another way. And so like Tamarra, you kind of pick and choose who you can be vulnerable with, right? It's all about what's safe for you in that moment. If you feel like your friends aren't ready to hear that, then they just aren't ready to hear that. But if you feel like, you know what, I need to get this off my chest, I feel like it'll be beneficial for our friendship, and my mental health, if they know and I have someone I can kind of talk to about it, then definitely go for it. I just came out and said it. It took a lot of courage, but once I got it off my chest, my roommate asked, and she's one of my best friends to this day. She was just like, okay. She asked like 2 questions. How can I help? And I was like, you know what? This is how you can help. And that was it. And now I feel like I have people who might not have BFRBs, but at the very least, they know what it means to be Black and have something and experience racism and experience medical racism. And so I can weave in my experience with BFRBs without much of a bad of an eye.
We had a attendee who shared a reflection on some of what has been said, and the comment includes, I usually say that I have a bad habit at picking at myself casually when it comes up in conversation. It's a fine line between oversharing with some people because it can make some people feel uncomfortable, like it can be cringe to some. If my sister sees me pulling, she says awareness and then carries on, and a conversation is normal.
Great advice.
Yes, that is true. And I have had that experience too, because I casually will pick at conversations and nothing is wrong in that moment. It's just something to do. And yep, I've had that experience with people who are uncomfortable because they don't they don't understand it. Even as we discussed it, they still don't really get it. And that was kind of a hard thing to deal with too, because as I made myself vulnerable to people who are loving and supportive, I also had to accept that I made myself vulnerable to people who are not going to love it and support it. So it is that balance that you have to. I had to forgive people's lack of knowledge. I constantly had to practice forgiving that and understanding that they're not where I'm at and they don't have my experience. But I also have to continue to be real to myself. And like Saharra said, for my mental health, it was just too hard to hide. It got to a place where I was sinking deeper and deeper and deeper, and I just didn't see a way out. So, yeah, I definitely understand that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, and we have another question that's come in. How do I talk to my therapist about my BFRB when they don't know anything about BFRBs?
Yes. I think it's very common for Black folks, especially, but for everybody with BFRBs, that it's very hard to come across therapists or clinicians that have any sort of knowledge as to BFRBs. And I also just want to say, for folks who are in this space who are like, what are BFRBs? Y'all have been saying this and I still don't know. BFRBs stand for body focused repetitive behaviors. And so when we say BFRBs, we're just kind of talking about the hair pulling, the skin picking, nail biting, sometimes hair pulling, and sometimes, kind of eating, for lack of a better term, the hair. But there's many different ways that they can manifest for many different folks. But I was very lucky. I started therapy for my BFRB maybe 2 years ago. So I was an adult. And that was also the first time that I started therapy. So I don't necessarily have a lot of experience, but I would say your therapist should be someone, like just in general, your therapist should be someone that you feel comfortable relating things to, telling them, this is what's going on. If you feel like your therapist is not someone you feel comfortable with, I would reassess if that is the therapist for you. But it can start as simple as, for me, I can kind of have some difficulty like telling my therapist stuff like face to face, just like some social anxiety going on. So sometimes like after a session, I'll email her and be like, hey sis, like this is what I really wanted to talk about. And I've been like experiencing this thing. And it was kind of hard for me to put, to vocalize it in the moment. But, I have trichotillomania. And, I know you don't really have a lot of experience about that, but I kind of wanted to bring that up. And sometimes you have to advocate for yourself in your care, right? And so maybe even linking to BFRB.org, TLC, linking them so that they can start to read about it. They might not be knowledgeable in necessarily treating it, but if this is like your long-term therapist, you can urge them to go. And a lot of therapists, if I'm not mistaken, need to get continuing education credits. And so you can urge them to do that, right? And to learn a little bit more about what it means to treat a BFRB. So I would start there. I don't know if Tamarra has something else you would add.
Yeah, so it is a hard conversation to have because I had this experience about a year ago. I met with a therapist and she was my long-term one, and she wasn't that familiar with BFRBs. And the way that I brought it up in conversation, it had to come immediately because I've had consistent experiences with therapists that were only able to treat or seem only willing to treat the anxiety portion of it, and not understanding that my BFRB does not necessarily always manifest with anxiety. So I had to make that very clear from the very first session, because if they're not willing to put in the work to understand and be knowledgeable, then it's going to be a waste of your time. Mm-hmm. And luckily, this therapist, I've stopped therapy since then. But this therapist was very open and wanted that knowledge, and we kind of shared information, and she was able to build a program that was purposeful to me. And that took a process. And yeah, you have to give some time for them to gain that knowledge and be open about that. But if you tell them and they don't seem to be open to that, it's time to seek someone else.
Mhm. Yeah, that reminded me. Someone put in the chat, when you said, I think that's also another thing that, especially in the Black community, it's hard for Black folks to like wrap their head around that, like, okay, like, so you pull your hair, you must be really anxious. Sometimes I pull when I'm anxious. Sometimes I'm pull when I'm bored. Sometimes I'll be watching Futurama and the next thing you know, I have like 5 eyelashes next to me. And it's not because I'm anxious, it's just because I'm bored. And so learning that the BFRBs, there are many different triggers, quote unquote, for it, right? It might be boredom, it might be anxiety, it might be OCD, it might be depression, it might be, all these sorts of things, excitement, right? And so understanding that as well, there are a lot of intricacies when it comes to like acknowledging and like treating this too. And so just being cognizant of that, and it's hard to explain, but as long as you know for you, I think that's really, really important.
And Saharra, we got a question in the Q&A about when do we meet? Do we meet on a consistent basis, as this person would like to connect with other Black women who have trichotillomania?
Okay. Yeah. So, like I said before, Tamarra and I are constantly I laugh because, so full transparency, Tamarra is a full-time student and she also works full-time. I'm a full-time student and I'm on like 2 research projects. So we've had to scale back. We used to meet bi-weekly. We've had to scale back significantly for our mental health as well, right? And when we're thinking about radical self-care, we had to scale things back. So we're now meeting monthly, every 3rd Wednesday of the month. So if you email us or go on our Instagram, we have like a sign up form, and you'll be immediately on the email list and you'll get the updates about, when we're meeting. But that's usually when we're meeting. Typically every so often, every couple months, Tamarra and I kind of meet together and kind of assess, like, is this a good time for folks to meet? Are we getting a lot of attendees this day versus this day? But for right now, that's kind of what we landed on. And I saw also, oh, hold on. Yeah, there we go. Tamarra, I think this one might be for you.
Yes. So I'm so happy that someone asked this question. So the question is, as a teacher, do you see a lot of BFRBs in your classroom? If so, how do you respond to your students engaging in BFRBs? So I do see this often. And one of the things that I do immediately is I go to, in special education, for those of you that don't know, typically the teacher is access the academic case manager, and then there is the clinical case manager, who is the social worker, therapist. So I would immediately go to them, share my knowledge, and we would first typically discuss with the parents, because we want to know, is this is something that's happening particularly at school? Is this happening across the board? Is it happening during certain situations? Has there been any recent changes in the last couple months? And then what we do is that we meet with the core team to discuss a plan of behavioral strategies. If I do see it in that moment, I do everything I can to redirect. I do not bring any attention, because I would never want one of my students to feel like they're being picked on or they're being exposed, especially if it's something brand new. So I'm very thoughtful in the way that I address it, but I also want to make sure that they are feeling okay, and also giving them that space to take a break away from the group if they need it. So that is one of the things that we do, and it is a big process, is because we need to discover or figure out if this is a long-term thing or if it's a short-term thing. Some of my students, it is a long going battle, and for some students it happens every once in a while, and then you don't see it for months or years at a time.
Great. Always good to get different perspectives. I didn't really think about that, encountering that in school. And sometimes it's as simple as, seeing it and being an advocate, for the folks that you're around. For Tamarra, being a teacher, being an advocate for young folks. There's a lot in terms of ageism, and we think that young people don't go through things, and we think that young people can't vocalize. And so, how do we navigate that and be advocates and activists for our youth as well, right? Because we're thinking about, I'm pretty sure the data says that a lot of people start their BFRBs at a very young age. And so, how do we get people right there, right? When they're 10 years old or 13 years old. So there's another question, two more. So what advice would you give to Black teens starting their BFRB journey that who don't have support from their family? Yeah, I mean, that's awesome, because I literally just talked about this. Right. And so again, kind of going back to this ageism piece. Also, Hannah just put, this document has many links to help support individuals experiencing BFRBs, as well as resources for loved ones. So that might be a great starting point. So just make sure you open that and pinpoint that as well. But kind of going back to the question at hand, what advice would you give the Black teens starting their BFRB journey? Understanding that, like, one, I think there's an acceptance element for yourself, like understanding that, like, yes, like I do have a BFRB and it's okay to have one, and finding some acceptance in that. And so whether that means, reaching out to the Imani BFRB support group or other folks, just to kind of have that sense of community. Community can be very important. I would say continue advocating for yourself, and also maybe find some adult allies and or mentors that can advocate on behalf for your parents. We all know parents can be very fickle when it comes to us, right? Some parents might be like, you're only 15. What do you mean you're going through a lot? Like, what do you mean you're depressed? And so maybe a teacher or a principal or a mentor or a friend's parent can be that sort of bridge to your parents. Maybe if you don't feel comfortable or you need someone to better advocate for you, that, hey, like, so-and-so came up to me, they said, they really want to talk about this. I just wanted to bring it to your attention and kind of help facilitate a conversation. And so I feel like adult allies are very important for young people, because oftentimes we think that they don't go through things and that they, don't know, their voice doesn't matter. And so I think for me, that would be a good place to start. And also kind of just, doing some assessments, going around and, hinting at certain things and kind of like assessing like how parents react to it and kind of going from there. But I feel like in this moment, adult allies would be great. Tamarra, do you have anything to add?
No, I think that you did excellent with that answer. And another thing that that I had to learn, because I had support in my family, but again, without meaning to, some of their advice or suggestions were potentially harmful. So what it took for me was I did need to go to people with my experience, and going to finding communities and finding groups was the actual first step for me. I've been in therapy for a while before I found a group that was beneficial to me. That was actually the first step, because it helped me stop this process of there's something wrong with me. For even going through therapy and doing all the homework that they tell you to do, I still kept going through that process of there's something wrong with me. And I think it took a community of like peers to get me out of that, so I can then receive the actual lessons throughout my therapy later on.
Yeah. And I think last thing for this question, you might be thinking, like, where do I even get those adult allies? Or, starting with community organizations, community leaders is a great start. If there are, boys and girls clubs, for example, or I don't know if those are outdated or not. I'm not sure. I'm not sure if people still engage in those, but, community resources, that specifically work to advocate for youth. Go there and start a conversation. Maybe you're not ready to talk to your parents, but that could be great practice, and they can also advocate on your behalf. And then last but not least, want to make space for this last question that we've gotten here regarding therapy. Is there a realistic goal to strive towards for folks with TRIC? So having TRIC, hello. So having TRIC especially, I've been really framing what does it mean to be in recovery with trichotillomania, a hair pulling disorder. And I'm very passionate about talking about what recovery looks like, right? So we know these are chronic issues, right? There is no necessarily, as of right now, 2022, February, there is no cure for it, right? And so a lot of this is management of the BFRB. And so for me, what has brought me to recovery has not equated to has stopped pulling forever. That might be a goal for you, but for me, that was not a realistic goal because I knew I've been struggling with this since 10 years old. My goal when I entered therapy was, hey, I might not be able to stop this completely, but I want to pull less than what I have been doing. I want eyelashes again. I want the bald spot in my hair to go away. I want the discoloration in my nether regions to be gone. And so I now have eyelashes for the first time. Great. I now have eyelashes for the first time since I was 15. And there are moments when I still do pull for my eyelashes and I get frustrated. But a lot of my therapy has also been, accepting that I have trichotillomania. There might be moments where I pull, but I have the tools now to stop myself from pulling, to expose myself to the behavior and stop myself from pulling. I have used fidgets instead of pulling for my eyelashes or my hair. And so for me, that was a realistic goal. So sitting down with your therapist or sitting down with yourself even and journaling and seeing what feels good for me in this moment. And your goals can always adjust. They can always shift. So hopefully that offers some insight for you there.
Awesome. Well, I can't believe that an hour is almost done. This has been an amazing conversation, a much needed conversation. I truly hope it sparks more dialogue and much needed change. Like Saharra mentioned earlier, if you have any questions or thoughts, please send them in to info@bfrb.org. And Hannah, if you can drop that. Oh, you've already done it in the chat. Thank you so much. Please help me thank Saharra and Tamarra for their incredible insight, for all of the hard work you did to pull together these group submissions, for your collaboration. We're so appreciative for you. Thank you both for making time. Wanted to thank the amazing TLC staff for putting this event together and translating it live in Spanish. Thank you, team. And to all of you for tuning into this important conversation. We're grateful for your presence tonight and hope to see you back again. Don't forget to help us by completing the post-event survey, which is now linked in the chat and will also be in the post-attendee email you receive tomorrow. And just a heads up that we're launching a new event called TLC Together. It's starting Tuesday, March 1st, and it's focused on mindfulness and meditation. It'll be a 30-minute session designed to help us breathe and calm and get centered together. So registration details will be on the TLC website tomorrow, and we hope to see you there. And stay tuned for more information about TLC's March events through email and social media. So thanks again, everyone, for joining us, and we hope you have a great evening. Good night.